When we work with percentages and of sums, we need to change the percentage into a fraction. Can you still remember what the denominator must be when you convert a percentage to a fraction? Yes, 100. So every time you receive a percentage and you have to do an of sum, you simply change the percentage into a fraction using the denominator of 100. But sometimes it might be difficult to do a sum with a denominator of 100. So remember, you can simplify the fraction in order for you to work out the of sum easier. Let's recap how to work out an of sum. We've discussed two methods at the start of the year, but I'm sure there will be more methods that you can actually follow. Method 1 we discussed was changing the whole number into a fraction. So, how do you do that? You make the denominator 1. So, whatever the whole number is, you make it a fraction. The example we are going to use is a half of 10. We already have a half, which we now have to multiply with 10. But 10 we should first make a fraction. 10 over 1. Why do we multiply, grade 6ers? Because of means multiply. The answer gets smaller. We sometimes think we are actually dividing, but we are not. If you are dividing with a fraction, your answer will get bigger. But if you multiply with a fraction, your answer will get smaller. Why? Because a fraction is only a small part of a whole. So if we have the two fractions, we now need to multiply. How do we do that? We multiply the numerator with the numerator, the denominator with the denominator. So top with top, bottom with bottom. We sometimes want to multiply diagonally, but you can only simplify diagonally, not multiply. So 1 times 10 is 10. 2 times 1 is 2. So we're left with an improper fraction of 10 over 2. Now we must just change that into a whole number. How do we do that? We divide. Because a fraction is only part of a whole, we must determine how many 2's can fit into 10. So we say 10 divided by 2, and our final answer is 5. Half of 10 is 5. That is method 1, making your whole number into a fraction and then simply multiplying top versus top and bottom versus bottom. The second method is definitely quicker, but sometimes you get confused with what you need to divide and what you need to multiply. So the second method's formula is taking your whole number, dividing it by the denominator, and multiplying it with the numerator. What does that mean? The denominator tells you how many parts of the whole this fraction is. So if we are working with thirds, it means a third has 3 parts to get to a whole. So how many thirds can divide into 15? And that's why we divide with 3, which is the third. So we first need to decide how many can go into 15. So we say divide with 3, and then we realize we have 2 thirds. So whatever 1/3 equals to, we need to multiply it with 2. So we take the whole number, which is 15. We divide with 3, which is the denominator. We get 5. Then we multiply with 2, which is the numerator. And then we get 10. So grade 6's, this method, yes, it's shorter, it is easier, but it's not always going to work out perfectly. A 3 divides into 15. But say now, for instance, the denominator was 4. 4 does not divide evenly into 15, and then you will have to use method 1. Please try and simplify the fractions as far as possible so that the denominator can divide into the whole number evenly. If it cannot, then simply use method 1. Let's look at the explanation page, which you pasted in your books. The example we are going to use is 40%. You will see at the top of your worksheet, this 40% has already been simplified. Obviously, 40% is 40 over 100. With percentage, your denominator will always be 100. And then it was simplified to 2/5. You can also have 4/10, because that is also an equivalent fraction of 40 over 100. You just divide with 10 and divide by 10. So the example is 40% of 50. This method given is method 1. You may use method 2 as well. I'll discuss it now. So 40 over 100 times with 50 over 1. Why did we put 50 on 1? Because we need to make it a fraction. And now we simply have to multiply. Top times top, bottom times bottom. 40 times 50 is 2,000, and 100 times 1 is 100. If we have this improper fraction, we just divide and we get an answer of 20. So 40% of 50 is 20. You will see on the right-hand side that we also showed you how you can simplify the equation. So if you have 40 over 100, you can divide numerator with 10 and the denominator with 10. So you're left with 4/10. But then you can divide the 50 with 10 and the 10 with 10. And you are left with 5 and 1. So if you want to simplify, remember what you do at the top, you must do at the bottom. And you then simplify either the top and the bottom, or you can also simplify diagonally. You're not allowed to simplify horizontally. Okay, so if you have 5 times 4, you get 20, because 1 times 1 is 1 and 20 on 1 is 20. So if you do decide to simplify, it makes the equation smaller, but you need to simplify correctly. Otherwise, your answer will be wrong. The second example, 6% of 275. What do you do with the 6%? You put it on a 100. Yes, you make it 6 over 100. You can also make it 3 over 50, because then you just simplified it. You times it with 275 on 1. You made your fraction, and you get 6 times 275 is 1,650. 100 times 1 is 100. You divide and you either get 16,5, 16 and 50 over 100, and you simplify it to 16 and a half. If you would have used method 2, you would have not used the denominator of 100. You would have either said 4 over 10 or 2 over 5. Took the 50, divided by 5, you get 10 times 2, 20. If you had worked with 10, you would say 50 divided with 10 is 5, times 4 is 20. But you wouldn't have been able to use 100 if you wanted to use method 2. Method 2 will not work with this example, because even if you do change it to 50, 50 does not divide into 275. So very important, if you get your percentage, simply put it on 100, which is your fraction, and then simplify as far as possible. What you do at the top, you must do at the bottom. At the bottom of your explanation page, you have your first worksheet that you need to complete. Remember, you must change the percentage to a fraction. So you've got 50%, 20%, 15%, 30% and 70%. You change those percentages into a fraction with a denominator of 100, and then grade 6s, remember to simplify. If you do not simplify, you will probably have to use method 1. If you do manage to simplify, you can use method 2. Remember, what you do at the top, you must do at the bottom if you simplify. So let's recap. You can either be given a fraction, you can be given a percentage, or you could be given a decimal fraction. What do? You simply change the percentage or the decimal fraction into a fraction. How do you change the decimal fraction into a fraction? If it's 1 place after the comma, you work with 10. If it's 2 places after the comma, you work with 100. And if it's 3 places after the comma, you work with 1,000 as your denominator. So it's easy to change your decimal fractions into a normal fraction as well, using tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay, if you have your fraction, you need to simplify. So simplify 5 tenths into a half. Okay, and the same applies if you have 50 over 100. And so you then simplify any of the three, the fraction, the decimal, or the percentage, because you took it to a fraction. And then you do method 1 or 2. If you cannot simplify the fraction and it stays 100 or a big number, it's safer to use method 1. If you do manage to simplify, see if you cannot use method 2, which is a bit quicker to do.